My name is John Passfield. Today I'm going to read in this video from my novel, Bethune. I'll hold it up here, The Only Person Alive in the World. The complete title is A Novel by John Passfield. And that's an illustration. The illustration is from a painting by the historical Dr. Norman Bethune, who really captured something, I think, in the eyes. A man of action and thought. I always thought of it as thought hyphen action, action hyphen thought. He never performed an action that wasn't based on an idea, and he never had an idea that he didn't want to put into action. A very fierce man. I don't know whether I'd want to meet him personally, the historical Dr. Norman Bethune, but I can certainly admire him as a character in a book where it's safe to write about a character who you're not meeting personally. But to see the strengths and the weaknesses in a man who's actually striding on the world stage, very fascinating, and a Canadian, which is kind of nice if you're a Canadian writer. I'll read this summary on the back of the novel and then explain what I'm going to read about or read from in this video. A young Canadian doctor, Norman Bethune, sets up a practice which he hopes will lead to money and prestige. However, his social conscience leads him on a journey through the Canada of the Great Depression, the Spain of the Spanish Civil War, and the China of the Chinese Civil War and the Japanese invasion. Ultimately, the journey becomes a quest to understand the world in which he has found himself living, to develop a compassionate response to that world, and to discover the essence of himself as a human being. Well, I think the main character in every serious novel goes through something similar. To understand the world in which one is living, to then respond to that world based on your own sense of the proper response, the best response, the ideal response, then to make an assessment of oneself. There's that famous quotation that the unexamined life is not worth living. Sorry for that little mental slip there. The unexamined life is not worth living. So he's examining his life as he's living it and as he's looking back on it. So the topic of this video will be Bethune reflects on his life. Now, in terms of structure, there's three sections in the novel of 5 chapters each. 5 chapters in Canada, 5 in Spain, 5 in China. Then there's a final chapter in which he's infected and dying, but not dead, still very active. The structure of the chapters, well, in another video I read from the action sections in a number of chapters, just to give the flavor of the action, the things that he's actually doing. Today I'm going to concentrate on his inner thoughts, stream of consciousness. Today I will read from the passages in which the main character, Dr. Norman Bethune, mulls over his life experience in order to make sense of his experiences. In effect, he's reflecting on the meaning of the life that he is living. There are 4 segments of the sections I'm reading today in every chapter, but I won't read from all chapters. I'll read only from chapters 1 to 5. So just the Canadian chapters, the first 5 chapters of the novel, as an introduction to how this particular layer of thought in the mind of the main character, conscious, subconscious, we have all these layers in our minds. As we do anything, we're thinking of many, many different things. So this is one of the layers that's moving through his mind as he's performing his actions. I want to give the flavor of the novel, of the way in which a main character thinks his way through life. So let's have a look then at Chapter 1, Canada 1, with this particular layer of thought being isolated for this reading. Here it is, page 3. Brood inside an egg, like everyone else, nurtured in primeval fluid like a duckling or a swan, eager for a chance to swim downstream. My father was a Presbyterian minister. My mother was a missionary. I went to Sunday school and church twice every Sunday. I come from a race who are widely traveled. A drop of family blood nurtures many a far-flung thorn. No Bethune has ever been known to compromise. And over on page 4, another segment of this level of thought in his mind. I served in the trenches of France in 1915. Mud, blood, burnt lungs, and splintered bones. The face turns white as the ground turns red with blood. I dawdled in the cafes of Paris, 40 miles from the agony, the mud, and the blood. Turn your back on the scars of the war and have a drink. Post-war studies at the hospital for sick children in St. Ormond Street, eager to tilt against the champions of infantile disease, to make a name for myself amid the profession's elite. And then skipping many, many thoughts in his mind, both actions and thoughts, over to page 6. My father and my mother were a great influence on my life. I fought with my father all the time. With my mother, I had no quarrel at all. We met in Scotland, Frances and I, after the war. She was not like me, and I was not like her. Her mother warned her not to marry a man like me. So I didn't get along with Dr. Archibald, so who was right and who was wrong? I tried to pull him up out of the mud, but he wouldn't budge. So different elements, different forces in his life. People represent forces that impinge on our consciousness, try to influence us consciously or influence us without them being conscious. And so we either accept these influences and go with them, or we repel these influences. So his wife Frances, more about her in the novel, but not all in this segment of his thoughts, this level of his thinking. More about Dr. Archibald, his first boss as chief surgeon, and a little less about his parents, because he moves on early from his parents as images in his mind who influence. Well, they're always there. His mother a missionary, his father a missionary, his mother too. Father a minister missionary, his mother a missionary. Bottom of page 7. There were children hunting for coals along the railway track. They would gather them in a sack. They would take them home to their parents to heat the house. I saw medicine as the noblest of professions. The knights of the scalpel, knights of the x-ray, knights of the rib shears, knights of the bedpan, I would say, when I needed a laugh. What kind of country is this? Is this a society without a soul? Is every person just a separate lump of clay? So assessing his society in terms of his own ideas, what would be the ideal society? What is Canadian society at the moment? And what can I do to move Canadian society a little closer to the ideal? Let's go to chapter 2, Canada 2. More of the same level of thought in his mind. Excuse me. Floating in a sack of amniotic fluid, thinking thoughts about the waiting unknown, dreaming the dreams that are the nectar of the soon-to-be born. Religion, to me, was not so much attendance at church or praying for our souls to go to heaven, rather the Bible as a catalog of the sufferings of the world. A citizen of Canada, citizen of the world. Normandy, Scotland, Hawaii, the family roots drink from the waters at the ends of the earth. So he's putting all of these thoughts together to see what they add up to. Page 14. The men would gurgle on the stretchers, lean over and spit up blood. We would carry them back from the front as fast as we could. There was war and there was peace. The war was a puddle of blood on a stretcher. The peace was a gallon of wine in a Paris cafe. Learning contempt for the staid and the stodgy, eager to break the routines of disease, chafing in my role as a lowly intern. Well, that was Bethune. He wanted to be in charge. Page 16. My father fought the demon in me that he feared in himself. I fought the demon in my father that I feared in me. When both of those demons were dead, we were both free to go. When Frances and I first met, I felt that I had found the rest of myself. She was the fragment that had been missing from the moment of birth. I absorbed her into my skin and carried on. Fear of change is a palpable fear. Better to stay with the tried and the true. I drove a roadster, and Archibald rode in a rocking chair. Well, two people he got along with and didn't get along with. Archibald, the chief surgeon, his boss in his hospital in Montreal. Frances, his wife, twice married, twice divorced. What do we do with the people who are such powerful influences in our lives that they become imagery? And imagery can enhance us or diminish us, can help us or hurt us. Think of Othello and Iago and imagery in the minds of those two characters. Page 17. Parents would tuck a blanket up around the neck of a sick child. They would dump their can of coins on the kitchen table. They would shuffle the coins and wonder what they could afford. How did money ever come between doctor and patient? How did money manage to form such an inhuman wall? Pin their hand to the table with a scalpel and take their cash. Why do old people beg on the street corners? Why are there children without enough food? Why is compassion not available to all? Well, that's the end of chapter 2. Lots of action in chapter 2, lots of thoughts, but I'm isolating certain thoughts in his mind, an evaluation of the life of himself and the life of his society. Into the next chapter, page 21. A woman in the agony of labor, a fountain spouting blood and milk and tears. Behind the blood, the significance of birth. The blind, the lame, the lepers in the Bible, some of their sufferings all around me as I walked to school. I sensed that we were living in biblical times. Beaverton, Blind River, Owen Sound, Ravenhurst, Toronto, Sault Ste. Marie. Me inside these places, they inside me. Page 22. We would lean the stretchers upright against the wall. The men would blast them with a hose and let them dry. Impossible to clean off all the blood. Never again, was what we all said after the war. There will be wars and rumors of wars, was wisely said too. What was it that could truly be never again? So the search for the thing that you could change after the First World War, that would be changeable and would be permanent here on Earth. Working hard and playing harder, meeting the very best of the best, the rewards of making one's way to the top of the heap. Page 24. My mother a missionary, others first, yourself last. At times I envied her that she was never in search of herself. When Frances and I divorced the first time, I was glad to let her go. She was the part of me that needed to break away. There was a war inside myself that needed a truce. Dr. Archibald hired me because I reminded him of himself when he had been young. When he fired me, he was probably thinking exactly the same. Liberation or capitulation? Life is war against the self. The self we murder must not be allowed to die in vain. So Bethune is the character who in the first 5 chapters in Canada really is in search of himself. Some of my characters, Terry Fox, know who they are almost from birth, and they're seeking an ideal situation in which to be their best self. For Bethune, the first 5 chapters as well, who is Bethune? Who am I? Am I the society surgeon with great prestige and the money and all the wonderful things that come along with that, or am I this fellow who wants to help the world in agony and make it better? Page 26. There were doctors who couldn't pay their electrical bills. Medicine as a business service for pay. How can you deal with people who don't have a thing to trade? When I look a parent in the eye, I see dollar signs. When he looks me in the eye, he sees dollars too. We ignore the child in agony on the couch. Why are there mothers afraid to call a doctor? Why do young men sleep on park benches? What is the force that makes the children's paintings so dark? And then chapter 4, Canada 4, doing things in Canada, that's a doctor, thinking things in his mind at this level that tries to sort out his values and decide on a course of action beyond what he's actually doing right now. Page 31. Am I an amoeba to throb unnoticed? Am I a crustacean to scour the seas? Am I an eagle ready to launch myself into the air? Not so much the Christ on the cross, more the Christ who walked among us, the Christ who healed the sick, the halt, and the lame, yearning for the freedom of open water, sensing that I am anchored in a cove, smelling the breezes that insistently tug at my sails. page 32. If you could keep the blood inside, the man would live. If it all leaked out on the stretcher, the man would die. That was the dictionary definition of life and death. Idle chatter about how the post-war world was so wounded, about the great works of art that we were going to write and paint. One more drink and you'd be sure that you could do both. Tasting the very best that life on earth has to offer, sampling fine wines and engaging in clever repartee, acquiring a penchant for the taste of the finest cream. Page 34. Visits with my siblings were always a pleasure. Good people, living good lives, gods of our fathers, gods of our children, gods of ourselves. When Frances and I were married for the second time, I thought that we were mating for life. Orphan souls, divided by war, united again. Two swans gliding together on a placid pond. I went across town to work for the nuns of the Sacré-Cœur. It was Dr. Archibald who pushed me out the door. Room for only one set of hands on the levers of power. Page 36. The poor would come to me. I didn't invite them. They would hear that I was a doctor and come to me. These were people without a dime who had nothing to give. Keep the agony alive and you'll make a fortune. Smile like Satan when you find a disease that will make you rich. Learn to probe the patient for gold with your stethoscope. Why is medicine marketed like cake? Why is good health reserved for the rich? Why is the commodity of compassion in such short supply? Then the last chapter I'm going to read from, though, these thoughts at this level of his mind run right through the whole novel. Canada 5, chapter 5. Page 41. What is this world that is so raw and so bleeding? What is this world that is so thriving and so green? What is my personal contribution going to be? Religion is the marrow in my bones, not the surface of religion, but the core. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Reaching out and flapping my wings, testing the buoyancy of the updraft, an eagle rising from the nest and soaring away. 42, page 42. A piece of shrapnel caught my leg below the knee. Sent home to convalesce and think things over. A slight gimp in my leg and in my thoughts for the rest of my life. I left the artsy crowd behind when I left Paris. Sense of emptiness every time I filled my glass. All they did was drink and talk in Parisian cafes. Falling in love with Frances, our honeymoon in Europe, money flying out of our pockets in the wake of our skis. Page 45. So, there were patients without a dime who needed a doctor, and there were doctors without a dime who needed to serve. How to put 2 and 2 together and come up with 4. Hang more diplomas on your wall than the healers in heaven. Park your roadster in front of the hovels and hold out your hand. Bury your patients in unmarked graves on your way to the bank. Is this a society without a conscience? Is this a society without a soul? Is the best response simply to leave and close the door? Well, that is his question at the end of chapter 5, which we've reached in terms of what we're going to read in this video. Do you stay in Canada and try to implement your own ideas, or do you go elsewhere to another society? And he did. He went to Spain and then he went to China. But he was such an intense thinker and such an intense doer that he couldn't say, well, I'm doing the Canadian society doctor bit lifestyle and thinking, part-time about helping people. Maybe, which he tried a one-day clinic once a week on a Saturday and so on, help some poor people. But no, that wasn't it for him. So this is the level at which he's sorting out his value system, and it runs through the whole novel. But I think that's enough for today. So I'll read a few passages of reflection as a summary in a minute and then give some. So I'd like to read a couple of passages and I'll just mention where they come from. Uh, when I plan a novel, I write the novel, obviously, but I also write a planning notebook, and it's just thoughts that I jot down from conception. Oh, I'll write a novel about Norman Bethune. I have some ideas to research, to planning, and then to a full rough draft. And that becomes a book, actually. It's book length. It's available on my website for free, johnpassfieldbook.ca. Just go there, click on notebooks, and click on the Bethune icon, and there's a full book that you can read for free. I also write a journal. As I'm polishing the rough draft, month, 6 weeks, I just write reflections about Bethune, about the Spanish, the Chinese experiences, but the Second World War even, but also about novel writing. So that's a whole book length, and that's for free. If you go to journals on my website, johnpassfieldbook.ca, click on journals, click on the icon, you'll have it. So these two passages are from my journal. At a certain stage, here's what I wrote in the process of writing this novel. I want a novel which is a thematic unit. This means that the novel will be about one thing. It will be a 50,000 word thought, a 50,000 word idea pattern in the mind of the main character, which is taking place at one split second during the living of his life. So maybe the whole novel is a memory based on that last moment on the last page of the novel. This thought will have a problem-solving purpose for the main character. The question will be twofold. Number one, what to do about the problem of the moment. And number two, what kind of person has my whole life to this point led me to become? In order to achieve unity of thought, I wish to plan the novel as having a unity of design. This is why I think of a novel as being structured as a series of envelopes, each one holding a number of sub-envelopes. If I define an envelope as a device which draws together a number of items underneath its cover, then I can say that a novel of mine is composed of a series of idea envelopes, from a single unifying idea envelope to a number of supporting idea envelopes, each one fitting inside into a unified pattern. Okay, so that's one quotation from the journal. Here's another one. The main character will be a combination of the historical Dr. Norman Bethune, as I understand him to have been, and myself as a thinking and acting human being. The result will not be a biographical rendering of the historical Norman Bethune, that's what the history books and the biographies do, but of a fictional character, Dr. Norman Bethune, who will be an embodiment of a sensitive human being who encounters the world as he perceives it to be and responds to that perceived reality in a way that makes sense to him. The novel will seek to capture a double perspective, that of a fictional character who is engaged in the challenge of living his life while attempting to organize the imagery of that life as he perceives it to be, in order to seek an understanding of the life which he is living and of himself as a human being. So not to knock the history books and the biographies, but they basically describe the life. But in fiction, we not only get the life, but we get the fictional main character's attempt to understand that life. Now we think on the surface in prose, we think in the depths of our minds in imagery, and both are here. You might say battling it out in the life of Dr. Norman Bethune, the fictional character. So websites, well, the book is on Amazon. It's for sale. The novel, that is. Of course, it's holding it up just for a minute again. Bethune, The Only Person Alive in the World, a novel by John Passfield. It's also available for sale at my publisher's website, rocksmillspress.com, ROCKSMILLSPRESS, all one word.com. More information there as well. And then again, johnpassfield.ca, johnpassfield.ca, my own website with 2 free books, planning notebook and journal, just for clicking on them. And once again, I'll say thank you for watching this video.